This is continuation of the part 1. To go to the part 1 of the video, click on the I button. Moving on, Indian Constitution provides, again, this is one of the most important pillars of our Constitution, that we have fundamental rights. Fundamental rights are comprised between Article 14 to Article 35. Article 12 to Article 35 actually. We'll have a detailed discussion of fundamental rights because they're very important. But here's the overview. We have 6 subsets of fundamental rights, which comprises of separate articles, right? Every subset will contain 3 or 4 or 2 articles. Sorry. Right to equality is the first fundamental right that we have. It's a subset and contains Article 14 to Article 18. Article 14 to Article 18 will cover right to equality. It comprises of right to equality in the sense that every person is equal before the law and every person is protected equally before the law, and you cannot discriminate anybody on the grounds of caste, sex, religion, etc. These are the provisions that are taken into right to equality. We'll have separate discussion. Right to freedom. Right to freedom comprised in Article 19 to Article 22. Article 19 itself comprises 6 types of right. We'll discuss that later. It will comprise rights such as right to form cooperatives, right to assemble, right to speech, right, and right to life and liberty and certain things. So this is also very vital for the effective functioning of our constitution. And again, right against exploitation. These will cover child rights, on their rights not to work in factories below age of 14 or something like that. We'll go again in detail. So these are right against exploitation. You cannot exploit people and they have rights in the constitution. Moving on, right to freedom of religion, right? Freedom of religion is a fundamental right in our constitution, and there are 3 articles that covers that provision. Article 29, Article 30, sorry, there are 3 articles, Article 25 to Article 28. All right. Again, moving on, cultural and educational right. Cultural and educational rights are generally for minorities, but they are not restricted to minorities, but it mostly applies to the minority section of the community and the citizenship. So cultural and educational rights are Article 29 to 30. Right to constitutional remedy. It's very important to understand this right, because without right to constitutional remedies, all the above mentioned rights stands bold letters on a white paper, nothing else. Right to constitutional remedies has been called by Dr. Ambedkar as the heart and soul of this constitution. Constitutional remedies, as in, if you think your rights are violated, you can move to Supreme Court under Article 32 to enforce those fundamental rights. You can ask the Supreme Court to strike down a policy that you think the center or a state or any organization has made that infringes your fundamental rights. So you can move Supreme Court under Article 32. You can even move High Court under Article 226. But since here is the fundamental rights we are discussing, under Article 32 you can move Supreme Court and strike down any law or policy that is made by any government functionaries. So moving on, directive principle of state policy is the next chapter that we are going to discuss. Pillar. Directive principle of state policy, simply speaking, are formal guidelines that states need to take into consideration while formulating laws. Right, as I said, it's a separate topic and needs an entire session. They, like fundamental rights, promote political democracy. All right, but DPSPs aims to promote social and economic democracy and only put moral obligation upon state, which means that like in fundamental rights you can move to Supreme Court to enforce your fundamental rights. That's not the case here. You cannot move to Supreme Court to enforce your DPSP. It's a moral obligation only. The state ought to consider them before formulating laws, but they are not forced and obligated to take them into consideration. Moving on, fundamental duties were originally not part of the Constitution but were added by 42nd Amendment Act of 1976. Right? So fundamental duties, again a very unique feature, because majority of the Constitution do not have fundamental duties, apart from perhaps Japan and Russia. Japanese Constitution and Russian Constitution. It was recommended by Swaran Singh Committee, and 42nd Amendment was made to add the fundamental duties to the Indian Constitution. Indian Constitution provides for a secular state. Ours is a secular state and does not recognize any religion as official religion. So our country does not have any official religion, right? Like Islamic Republic of Pakistan. We are not Islamic Republic of India or a Hindu nation or a Christian nation. We are a simple secular state. And also within Article 44 we provide Uniform Civil Code. Uniform Civil Code is in discussions these days. You'd randomly see them in news channels, and the government want to implement Uniform Civil Code. Uniform Civil Code simply means that there is only one law that governs every citizen of this country irrespective of your faith and belief. No matter if you are a Muslim or a Christian or a Hindu or a Jain or a Buddha, there will be a separate and only law that will govern your civil laws without taking into consideration your faith, religious faith in particular. Anyway, moving on, the secular system in our country is different from Western's concept of secularism. Western concept of secularism is complete separation of church and state. Right? There is absolutely no connection between the church and the state. Like they do not come face to face in their sphere of actions. While in India that's not the case. Ours is a positive concept. Positive concept in the sense that we do recognize religion and respect them equally. Right? It's not that we don't see religions. We have nothing to do with religion. We see all religions equally. So we give equal respect to all religions. So ours is a positive concept of secularism, unlike the Western countries where there is a negative concept of secularism, where they don't, for them the religion does not exist. That type of secularism exists in the Western countries. Further, India also provides for independent bodies such as Election Commission, CAG, that's Controller Auditor General of India, UPSC, etc., and ensure their independence through various provisions like security of tenure. So an election commissioner will have security of tenure. A cabinet committee or a cabinet of India cannot simply remove them at their whims and fancies. They have security of tenure, so they are entitled to take bold decisions without being afraid of them being thrown before their tenure is done. Fixed service conditions. Fixed service conditions means a parliament or a government cannot change service condition to torture or harass someone, suppose an election commissioner takes a bold stance, so his service conditions are fixed so that it cannot be changed in a way to harass him or to submit him to a particular way of behavior. And the expenses that incur into their functioning and their salaries and their upkeep is charged on Consolidated Fund of India. What does this mean? It simply means that they are not voted upon, right? Charged on Consolidated Fund of India simply means that those money are not voted upon. It simply takes the power of the parliament away from those money because they are not voted upon. We'll have to separate discussion on this as well. The Indian Constitution contains elaborate emergency provisions. Our Constitution also has emergency provisions of 3 types, right? First is national emergency, contained in Article 352. National emergency can be announced on the grounds of war or external aggression or armed rebellion. All right. So this is a very important section and can make or break the effective functioning of our national system, political system. So these are very important chapters that we'll cover in future sessions. So for now, it's a brief overview that national emergency can be declared on the grounds of war or external aggression or armed rebellion and are covered under Article 352. State emergency, that you must have ruled that Bihar has President's rule and Punjab has President's rule. So state emergency is President's rule covered under Article 356. It can be provoked or called on the grounds of 2 popular reasons. One, if the president thinks that the constitutional machinery is failing in a particular state, that the state's functioning and the policy making and the administrative functioning is violating the constitutional machinery, then the president can think that it is time that the president rules should be provoked in that particular state. And the second provision is when a center gives a particular direction for international agreements or for defense purposes and for better functioning of the state, and if the state fails to comply with those directions, it again can be a reason for the president to think that president rule can be imposed upon them. It can be used against the effective functioning of the state. Suppose there is a political party in the center and there is a completely opposite party in particular state, so it can create a lot of rift, the presidential rule. It has created a lot of rift, but it's a bone of contention between the center and state relationship. We'll have a separate discussion on this, but for the time being, there are 2 provisions on which president's rule can be invoked, and it is covered under Article 356. Third type of emergency is financial emergency. Financial emergency can be declared on the grounds of financial stability or credit of India under Article 360. Suppose there is these COVID times, the coronavirus times. Suppose our economy is dethroned and demolished completely, and now the center do not have enough cash and money to pay the salaries and allowances and every expenditure. It will simply ask, the president can simply say that the country goes into financial emergency, which simply will mean that salaries will be cut, the government salaries and allowances and expenditure will be cut significantly to make sure that the country does not go into huge depression, economic depression. We'll have separate discussion on the emergency chapter in further sessions. During an emergency, the central government becomes all powerful and the states go into the control of the center. As we said and discussed earlier, that emergency provisions can be used by center for its power grabbing nature, right? So it's a bone of contention between the center-state relation. So as again the provision says that central government becomes all powerful and the state go into the background. Also, the emergency provision converts our federal structure into a unitary one. Means our union and the center becomes all powerful, and state's power resides and recedes in the background, and that too without amending to the constitution. Remember, as I said, if you amend the constitution, you have to adhere to the basic structures of the constitution, but here you can do this. You can convert federal structure into a unitary one without formally amending the constitution. So the very idea of basic structure of the constitution does not come into the picture, and this is quite a blot on the effective functioning of our federal setup. Anyway, moving on. 73rd Amendment of Indian Constitution inserted Panchayati Raj institutions in India. Panchayati Raj institutions provide for third tier of government. Third tier in the sense there is a central government, there is a state government. Now there is a third tier of government at Panchayat level. Right? It's a democracy. There are elections, the electoral bodies conducting elections. There are funds allocated to them for effective functioning of the state, and it's a great way to decentralize the power, both financial and administrative. And India is perhaps the only country in the world to have added a third tier of government. There are no country which has added third tier of government in the world. So it's a very proud and a very important pillar of our constitution. We'll see that in coming lectures. So these are the salient features and important pillars of our constitution. I hope you liked the video. Please consider liking and subscribing the channel for further such videos, and we'll move together. Good luck.